Well, we're almost done. We just had one more topic to talk about at this spot. And a couple people have asked me about this plant, which is the Florida rosemary, Ceratiola ericoides. And it is not actually a rosemary. I saw someone smelling it. The rosemary that you eat is in the mint family. This is actually in the blueberry family. And unlike all the other hardwoods we've been talking about, this is killed by fire. So you can see a dead one right there, and it will not resprout. Anyone who's tried to kill these oaks knows that you chop it down and it just comes right back up from the roots. But these are not resprouters. They have seeds that live in the seed bank, and so after a fire, they'll come up from the seed bank as little seedlings. But it takes those seedlings 15 years to mature. So if you have another fire 3 years later, which is what we've been telling you to do for a longleaf pine sandhill, then you're going to kill those baby rosemaries, and you're going to eventually eliminate rosemary from your system. Now, as we know, you're probably not going to ever be burning your property as much as you would like to, so there will probably be some persisting there. But theoretically, if you were to burn all your property on a 3-year rotation, you would kill all the rosemary and eliminate it. But it is a native plant, so the question is, where does it fit in? And the answer is that it's not a part of the longleaf pine wiregrass community. It's a part of a different community that's called scrub. And we got some information about that on the last page. Who here is familiar with scrub plant communities?
That's where we all live. Yeah.
Okay.
Upland scrub.
Boundary, right? Wouldn't you say, Chris? Are we more scrub or longleaf?
No, we've got some patches here and there. We're kind of in an area where it's mostly sandhill, but along the ridge you're going to get into areas where you have a little bit of a mosaic and some little edges and ridges of interactions between the different habitat types.
From James's on west is more scrub, would you say?
My rosemary bald. Yeah, I live on a rosemary bald.
Well, yeah, I'm going to talk about, so the reason that this is kind of confusing and hard to figure out where is it, where should it be, is because we don't really know. What we know is that scrub is a much more ancient community than the longleaf pine wiregrass system. It consists of the Florida rosemary and some other shrubs like rusty lyonia, silk bay, which Deanna showed me. She has one sad, lonely silk bay back on the property.
That was on the, where was that? That was in the lane?
It was along the trail. I just looked at it with,
wasn't it?
I don't know if anyone else saw it.
Was that what you asked about, Peggy? That was something else.
And another plant is the coontie that we all know from landscaping. It's actually not that common out in the wild, and that's another scrub plant, and she's got some of them down here. And that community is much more ancient. It dates back into the early Pleistocene, a million years ago, and we think that Florida was covered in scrub back then because the climate was different. And then, towards the late Pleistocene, the more like between 10,000 and 100,000 years ago, the climate changed, and it became cooler and rainier, and there's a lot more lightning. And that is when the longleaf pine wiregrass system evolved, and those longleaf pine and wiregrass and a lot of the other associated plants are not only adapted to fire and resilient to it, they also encourage it. They're very flammable. Longleaf pine needles are very flammable. Wiregrass leaves are very flammable. And so that's their life history strategy. Those plants are perpetuating themselves by encouraging fire to come through. And so what we think happened is that the longleaf pine wiregrass system expanded and took over most of Florida and the southeast. And scrub was relegated into what we call fire shadows, or areas where fire just naturally wouldn't sweep through as easily. And those are along the coastlines, so that's why we have coastal scrub. And then on a few inland ridges, the big scrub in Ocala National Forest is between the St. Johns and Ocklawaha rivers, so it's in a giant fire shadow. And everywhere else, what we see is just these little straggly remnants on Florida's inland ridges of this ancient community that have just, for one reason or another, fire maybe didn't hit, you know, this one particular spot for as often as other spots, and that's where you'll see scrub persisting. It has nothing to do with the soil, it has nothing to do with hydrology. They grow on identical sites. It's purely fire history.
That's what I always thought it had to do with if James is higher or lower than Peggy's.
Well, you might think that because of fire shadows, that they tend to occur like you'd have a river, and then you'd have a hardwood hammock, and that serves as a fire shadow, and then you'd have scrub like kind of nestled on a slope in between the hammock and the sandhill. So you might think, oh, the hydrology is different there. Really, the scrub would love to be up on top of the sandhill. It's just gotten burned out. Okay. And in many ways, the longleaf pine wiregrass community is a more important community. As Dave mentioned, it has really high biodiversity. It's excellent wildlife habitat. And it's beautiful, whereas scrub is this impenetrable thicket. It's only got about 30 species in it, as opposed to the hundreds that grow in a longleaf pine sandhill. So I personally, and I think most people would agree with me, think that the longleaf pine sandhill is more important to restore. But the scrub is one of our native communities, and there are some endemic plants that are associated with it. There's some wildlife species associated with it, and Courtney is going to show us a couple of those after we get back to the house. So I think that if you have the opportunity, it might be a good idea to try to preserve some scrub patches on your landscape. If you've got a natural fire shadow or just some area where you've got a patch of rosemary, maybe just consider leaving it there, and you'll have on the landscape scale, you'll have more plant diversity because you've got this scrub community with a few of those plants there, and then you've got the longleaf pine sandhill here. And just one thing I forgot to mention is the sand pine, which some people here have sand pine stands they want to harvest. And sand pine is generally considered an inferior tree. It's short-lived and they fall over really easily. It's associated with scrub, which is the thick community, but it is one of our native trees, and it's another one that is adapted to less frequent fire. Because the cones are serotinous, and they have to be, in the peninsula anyway, the cones actually have to be opened by fire. So the plants need fire to survive, but then those baby sand pines will be killed by the fire if it comes again too frequently, which is why you don't see sand pine and longleaf. The longleaf system is in one place, the sand pine scrub is in another place. They have different fire regimes, and you have to use different fire regimes to maintain them. So this is just an explanation of rosemary. It does encroach, and so it is, you know, if you're trying to restore the herbaceous diversity and you've got a ton of rosemary, you're going to want to get rid of it. It's just that it's not, whereas with turkey oaks, they might encroach, and so you cut them back and burn them till they're small and keep a certain amount of them, and they'll just be perfectly happy to be a part of that system, burned every 3 years. The rosemary you will lose, and so if you want to save any of it, you would want to protect it from fire.
What's the lifespan of these rosemary?
I don't know the answer to that. I know that they take 15 years to reach sexual maturity and reproduce, and in an actual rosemary scrub, it would burn somewhere between every 15 and 30 years. So I don't know what the lifespan is beyond that. It's a good question.
I tried to transplant one and fell flat on my face.
Okay. Yeah, they're very finicky. Down on the Lake Wales Ridge, they're working really hard to try to get them to reproduce from seed and
you want to try again, we'll give you some. We have some small ones. Because we mowed them and now they're coming back up.